Day 1. Anna Bastian checked into her hotel room. She arrived in Dallas about 90 minutes ago on Tuesday afternoon, ostensibly as a representative of her company at a conference held at the University of Texas at Dallas. She had already attended the previous 2 years, but despite the opportunity to delegate the trip to someone in a lower position, she decided to go again herself. This conference was not prestigious. In fact, the conference itself had no impact on her decision to represent the company. Of course, she would diligently attend the 2-day meetings. Anna was not one to shirk her responsibilities. In business matters, Anna has always been a dedicated employee of the company. She never used work trips for personal purposes. Anna, it would seem, should have been the happiest person in the world. Her life was the envy of many. At 32, she was already vice president of marketing at a large, well-known company. She was respected both in the company and in the business world. She successfully moved up the career ladder and had an impressive track record, which many praised and some even envied. Her voice carried weight in a company with several thousand employees. This was a significant achievement. Anna's personal life also seemed ideal. She married her handsome boyfriend from university days, and they had 2 young daughters. Her husband owned several restaurant franchises and made good money. They were not rich, but they lived very prosperously. Nothing went wrong in her plan for life. Her husband was still attractive and in good physical shape. She truly loved her children. She was proud of her achievements at work. Sounds almost perfect, doesn't it? But in fact, Anna was even luckier. She was a real beauty, 175 centimeters tall, especially slender, with a toned body, which she inherited thanks to good genetics from her mother and daily training. Her beautiful face was successfully highlighted by shoulder-length straight brown hair, perfect cheekbones, and seductive lips. Her breasts were small, but firm and natural. Anna was admired in all her roles as a businesswoman, mother, wife, and friend. It's hard to lose at poker when you've been dealt 4 aces. So here's Anna, alone in her hotel room, busy unpacking and carefully arranging her business clothes for the next 2 days. It was hot in Dallas, but she knew the conference rooms would be cold because of the air conditioning. She had been through this before and was ready. Despite such an enviable life, Anna was at a critical stage. A problem arose. What began as a passing thought, it grew and turned into a constant, ongoing internal challenge. The psychological implications of how it developed didn't matter in her eyes. It was important to decide how to deal with this, accept the challenge or refuse it. Anna has already made her decision. Of course, deciding something is easy, but doing it is a completely different matter. People decide to quit smoking, but do nothing about it. The decision to come to Dallas was Anna's first step in supporting her choice. Packing your bags and actually coming here comes second. But even now, at this moment, Anna had the opportunity to retreat from her decision. She could have done it, but she had no intention of retreating. It was out of character for her. It's worth talking a little about Anna's character. It is obvious that she is a smart and successful person. But what's more interesting is that she was a good person. There is one thing about kindness that many people don't understand. Being a good person is actually easy. It is difficult to remain good when something bad tempts or attracts you. When a waitress mistakenly gives you an extra $20 and you give it back, that's a kind deed. And Anna really was a good person both in her personal life and in business. For the first 5 years of her marriage, Anna remained a faithful wife. But perhaps more importantly, for the past 3 years, she practiced loyalty. It's easy to remain faithful when you have no real options for cheating. But as she climbed the career ladder and strengthened her social connections, such opportunities began to appear more often. In the first 5 years of her marriage, Anna devoted herself to 2 main aspects of her life. First, having and raising children, and secondly, intensive work. Anna was not a housewife by vocation. She wanted to be a strong example for her daughters. She commanded respect. Thus, during these first 5 years, Anna was simply not an object of interest to men looking for a romantic connection. But as she moved up the corporate ladder and 2 pregnancies behind her, she became the object of desire for men both inside and outside her company. Now she went on business trips much more often, attended business dinners and evening events. There were many more opportunities to take a step in her direction, and men took advantage of this. First, several top managers in her company were targeting Anna. Some of them were divorced, others showed interest despite being married. They imagined themselves with her as a trophy, a high-status couple to be admired. If Anna was just a secretary, then for them she would be worthy of a one-night stand, but as the vice president of the company, she would be a real gem for them, a bright and stylish woman, always elegantly and sexily dressed. Anna was noticed not only by her colleagues and superiors in her own company, but also by the heads of other organizations with which she had to interact. One such episode particularly stuck in her mind: the president of a large corporation, a man of about 50 with carefully styled gray hair and a slightly heavy look, one day offered her a high position in his company. There were flattering notes in his words, and emphasized politeness was evident in his behavior, but Anna easily discerned the hidden subtext. She understood that this proposal was motivated not by her professional qualities, no matter how outstanding they were, but by personal admiration. The president did not voice his intentions directly. He was careful not to give himself away, but the tone of his voice and manner of communication left no doubt. This was a game that Anna was not going to enter. Her attractive appearance, ability to carry herself with dignity and high status in the company made her the object of close attention. Moreover, admiration came not only from influential men, but also from employees who occupied much more modest positions. Warehouse workers, for example, would never dare to speak out, knowing that such behavior could lead to dismissal. But over a pint of beer in a nearby pub, her name still came up in conversations. These discussions were rarely about her professionalism, but more often about her appearance, the way she dressed, and the grace with which she moved through the corridors of the office. At the main office, half a dozen young men, each with their own approach, were trying to attract her attention. One of them, barely 25, was distinguished by audacity that sometimes bordered on naivety. He often lingered near her desk under the pretext of business matters that could easily be resolved by email. Other, more experienced colleagues opted for invitational gestures, offers for lunch at fancy restaurants or drinks after work, made in a tone that was both confident and playful. Some went even further, risking their reputation, and hinted at the possibility of spending an evening together after a corporate conference, decorating their words with unobtrusive jokes. Even outside the office, her charm did not go unnoticed. One day, she was struck by an incident when the husband of one of her close friends began to behave more than friendly. This man, outwardly reserved and always gallant, suddenly began to notice details: how she styles her hair, what perfume she wears, and even made several backhanded compliments that made Anna feel awkward. In all these situations, Anna invariably maintained composure and inner strength. As soon as she caught a hint of something more than a business or friendly relationship, her reaction was precise and decisive. With a slight but firm smile, she made it clear that her family was her absolute priority and that any attempts to win her attention would be in vain. Her words, spoken without undue harshness, but with absolute confidence, worked flawlessly. The men, faced with her clarity, retreated, wounded, but without offense, because Anna knew how to maintain respect even in the most awkward moments. Anna's business behavior always aroused respect and admiration. She was the embodiment of professionalism, collected, focused, and principled. Anna knew how to build clear boundaries between her personal life and career. Even if there was no one close to her in her life, she would never allow herself a romantic relationship with someone from her company, not with the president, not with colleagues, not with any of her subordinates. For her, work remained sacred territory in which there was no place for emotions or personal sympathies. Business was business, always and without exception. Anna adhered to strict principles not only at work, but also in her personal life. She was a devoted wife and caring mother. For her, family was the support that was worth fighting for, and nothing could shake this confidence. Over the past 3 years, she has encountered cases that could have become a reason for betrayal. But every time Anna, guided by her inner beliefs and values, made a choice in favor of honesty. She never succumbed to temptations, leaving them beyond her thoughts and actions. It amazed her how others could afford to break this unspoken code by engaging in office romances that almost always ended in disappointment. Anna clearly saw how such relationships turned into a chain of misunderstandings, inconveniences, and scandals. Gossip began to creep around the office, destroying the atmosphere of trust and professionalism. And what about the awkwardness when separated partners met every day at adjacent desks? For Anna, it seemed obvious that such steps would inevitably lead to chaos and destruction. Why others did not understand this remained a mystery to her. Her family life was reliably protected, like fortress walls that she built around her home and her heart. Anna knew any infidelity would be fatal to their marriage. She imagined how it would break the heart of her husband, the man to whom she had dedicated her life, and how betrayal would destroy the cozy, warm atmosphere in which their daughters grew up. These thoughts strengthened her resolve to be faithful. Family was not just important for her, it was the meaning of life. Anna knew that a happy home is created through trust, love, and loyalty, and did not even allow herself to think about disrupting this harmony. Even if we forget about morality, Anna considered such actions not only unethical, but also an unjustifiably stupid risk that could lead to unpleasant consequences. She had no intention of becoming a participant in games where the result could be the destruction of other people's lives or her own reputation. However, it is important to note that Anna is not used to looking at her decisions solely through the prism of morality. She felt no resentment or contempt for men who tried to get her attention. On the contrary, she perceived their behavior with a certain degree of philosophical indifference. Anna knew how the world works. People have always sought and will seek happiness, even sometimes through dubious actions. She had heard enough stories from friends, colleagues, casual acquaintances to understand that betrayal is more common than is usually said out loud. And if you start to condemn one, it will soon turn out that your whole life is not enough to condemn. People are imperfect, and everyone is entangled in their own way in the tangle of their desires and mistakes. And yet, no matter how hard she tried to stay away from such situations, such attention inevitably brought her pleasure. She was attracted not so much to the men themselves as to the fact that they found her attractive. Her beauty, graceful posture, calm self-confidence, and brilliance of mind, all this invariably attracted glances. How could she blame them for this? She herself knew perfectly well that in love and war all means are good. Some were looking for a life partner in her, some were looking for a passionate adventure, and some were looking for just a moment of oblivion. For Anna, it was part of the natural order of things. Every new step, every attempt by the man to close the distance between them served as a silent compliment. She was not indifferent to these signs of attention, but she did not allow them to influence her judgment. Being the center of interest is a pleasant feeling, but Anna understood well what was behind it. She learned to accept compliments with gratitude, without allowing herself to get bogged down in a fragile web of false illusions or false hopes. So for the past 3 years, Anna has been deliberately practicing fidelity. This became not just a rule for her, but a kind of principle which she observed with respectable persistence. She rejected all proposals, leaving no room for double interpretations or false hopes. She stopped even casual flirtations that could momentarily ignite the imagination of her interlocutor with a slight, almost invisible determination. Her refusals were calm, without a trace of drama or reproach, but in every man with whom she spoke, a clear understanding of her position invariably awakened. Her behavior did not require much thought or doubt. Anna had a mind that allowed her to see the situation clearly and without embellishment, and a developed sense of self-awareness, which gave her actions internal integrity. She knew herself, her values and actions so deeply that many would envy her confidence. After all, self-awareness is a rare quality, one of the highest praises that can be given to a person. 14 months ago, something happened that at first seemed like a small thing, not worthy of attention. A simple, almost everyday event. But it was precisely this that was followed by a thought light, like a breeze, that touches the face for a moment and then disappears. The problem was that the thought only seemed fleeting. She returned to Anna later that night, as if knocking on a closed door in her mind. Then again and again. she turned into a tiny seed, which, as it turned out, was capable of sprouting into a whole garden of other thoughts. The event itself was trivial. Tony, a 25-year-old junior manager with bright eyes and an open smile who specializes in online marketing, approached Anna at the end of the working day. Slightly embarrassed, but determined, he invited her to go for a drink together. Tony made it clear that this was not an invitation to discuss work matters. Anna, out of habit, politely refused without hesitation, ending the conversation before it could gain momentum. Tony, remaining surprisingly calm, just smiled and shrugged. "I understand," he said, with that frank simplicity that is sometimes disarming. "But I still hoped for a different answer." He left, leaving her alone, and had no idea how often this happened to Anna. Most men probably had no idea how many competitors they had, each of whom was rejected with the same unwavering clarity. When Anna returned to her office, the thought flashed through her: he's cute. This thought, like many others, had to disappear, dissolving in the everyday bustle. But she didn't disappear. Life, of course, quickly intervened, distracting her with a heap of tasks and worries. And yet this thought, like a quiet guest who lingers at the door, did not leave her. Anna didn't think about Tony again that day. The bustle of everyday worries overshadowed his image, immersing the woman in the usual rhythm of family life. She did household chores, talked with her children, and discussed plans with her husband. But when night fell, quiet and calm, her thoughts took a different direction. After intimacy with her husband, feeling the warmth of his embrace, Anna began to fall asleep. But suddenly, like a shadow from the past, the image of Tony appeared again in her mind. Tony was cute. Tall, with a wide smile that showed even white teeth and a confident manner, he seemed to radiate some kind of inexplicable attraction. His deep gaze, in which one could easily drown, pierced the interlocutor, leaving a slight feeling of awe. He looked stately and well-groomed, his movements seemed thoughtful, but at the same time natural. There was something subtly sexy about him that made people, especially women, involuntarily hold their gaze a little longer than is usually customary. That night Anna fell asleep thinking about Tony. His image, bright and vivid, popped up in her imagination, but not as a real desire or secret dream, but rather as a fleeting thought, like an insignificant but intriguing detail of the past day. She allowed herself to fantasize a little, and then, lulled by these thoughts, disappeared into sleepy bliss. Now, you probably immediately decide that Anna will certainly start an affair with Tony. But rushing to conclusions means being superficial. If you thought that, you missed the point. The human mind is capable of a lot, but sometimes it just plays with us, giving out random images and scraps of desires. This does not mean at all that Anna was ready to cheat on her husband. On the contrary, her affection for him was deep and sincere. Tony, of course, made an impression, but for Anna, he remained only a colleague. Young, ambitious, attractive, and yet nothing more than part of her work environment. There was no room in her soul for doubts or desires that could shake her loyalty. Anna was a woman who valued stability, respect, and the comfort that she and her husband had created over the years. The only reason it mattered was because for the first time Anna felt physically attracted to a man who was openly interested in her. This feeling flared up suddenly, like a spark from a flint, and for a moment she lost control of herself. The situation itself was not something out of the ordinary, an ordinary compliment, a friendly smile, and perhaps a slightly longer glance than decency required. But for Anna, this was an important, almost stunning discovery, because she had always considered herself a devoted wife, whose feelings were focused exclusively on her husband. This did not mean that Anna was deprived of the ability to notice the attractiveness of other men. On the contrary, she could easily admire someone's appearance, but it always remained at the level of a passing observation. For example, she recently attended a Maroon 5 concert, where she once again realized how charismatic Adam Levine is. His bold smile, his movements on stage, his confident look with a hint of insolence, all this made her freeze, as if she had become a young girl again. Anna even laughed at herself, because Adam Levine was the complete opposite of the types of men she usually liked. Covered with tattoos, he seemed too provocative, almost unapproachable. However, The current situation was completely different. The young man to whom she felt attracted was not a distant idol whom she saw only on the screen or stage. It was her colleague, a man whom she met several times a week, with whom she exchanged short phrases and work jokes. He wasn't too handsome or shocking, but he had that inexplicable charisma that made her think. His voice, his demeanor, the way he looked at her, all this had a strange, almost hypnotic effect on her. Anna understood that finding someone attractive in itself is normal and there is nothing reprehensible about it. But it was the closeness and frequency of their meetings that made the situation especially difficult. She was starting to notice how his presence made her feel a little different. She would feel a slight tension in the air when he was around, and she would find herself lingering on his hands or his smile a little longer than she should have. Anna became more and more convinced that she was no different from the men in her company who furtively glanced at the pretty young secretaries. There was nothing reprehensible in this, as it seemed to her. She, too, could allow herself to discreetly admire Tony several times a day. This little secret weakness became her personal outlet. Anna looked at him with pleasure, carefully hiding her feelings behind a mask of businesslike calm. Her gaze slid over his dark hair, slightly carelessly styled, over the strict lines of his suit, which made his figure especially expressive. She liked the way he moved confidently, but without unnecessary pathos. Especially on Fridays, when the company had an informal atmosphere and employees could afford a looser style of clothing, Anna found an additional reason for her secret interest. Fridays meant Tony showed up in jeans that fit him perfectly, highlighting his slender figure. This was a kind of bonus for her at the end of the work week. Anna, like other colleagues, looked for a moment to glance at him as he passed by. And although these were only fleeting observations, they brought her a strange but pleasant feeling. Her fantasies stopped there. If, say, Adam Levine came into the office now, she would look at him with the same interest. Tony had begun to gain more and more respect from Anna in recent months. Despite the fact that their work positions did not involve frequent communication, she increasingly heard positive comments about him. It seemed that he was not only attractive in appearance, but also capable of professionally solving complex problems. Anna could not help but notice that such a reputation spoke of him as a person worthy of respect. But most of all, she was surprised and at the same time delighted by his behavior. The young man, aware of her marital status and realizing that she was much older, nevertheless decided to take a step that others would probably consider reckless. He asked her out on a date, directly, without hints, without excuses about business pretexts. This act spoke of courage and self-confidence. For Anna, who was accustomed to more cautious or even fearful manifestations of sympathy from men, this came as a surprise. She considered the very idea of going somewhere with him to be borderline impossible. It seemed wrong to her, almost comical, but she couldn't deny that she felt sympathy for Tony. He remained a boy to her, ambitious, a little cocky, but at the same time incredibly charming. His self-confidence and sincere sympathy for her flattered Anna. She found him physically attractive, and this added intrigue to their already unusual interaction. Weeks passed. The only thing that has changed is that Anna's physical attraction to Tony has developed into a real one: lust. Again, don't jump to conclusions. Anna had no intention of revising her principles. She just kept finding this guy attractive. In fact, the only action Anna ever took against Tony occurred during a 2-day business trip. She was alone, and she began her sexual fantasies. At the end of her fantasy, Anna realized that this man was Tony. The next night, she again imagined Tony as the protagonist of her fantasies. However, you should not attach much importance to this. A few months ago, Adam Levine was on her mind. Even before this, Anna's fantasies were associated with David Beckham. It's just that Tony appeared in her dreams now. It was her first fantasy about a young man. Weeks passed, and then months. Not much has changed in Anna's life. She was still a happily married woman who did not cheat on her husband. She continued to attract the attention of men and just as clearly and confidently rejected their proposals. The only thing that has changed is that Anna began to think more about what exactly those men who tried to hit on her were thinking. She understood, for example, that some senior executives inside and outside her company sincerely appreciated the idea of a hot couple with high status. Anna thought about it and admitted that the very idea of such a couple was really tempting. She understood why an ambitious man would want such a relationship and why she was such a desirable trophy for them. It was easy to get a young secretary, but building a relationship with a woman like Anna is not. Anna always considered her husband a successful man, a man who stood firmly on his own 2 feet. He was kind, reliable, and hardworking, and his income provided a comfortable life for their family. However, in her eyes, he lacked that special sparkle that turns a person into a major figure in the business world. Their lives were stable but unspectacular, and they were not considered a high-status couple. Anna, with her refined taste, ability to find a common language with any interlocutor, and innate elegance, would fit perfectly into such a union, but her husband, with his local business, remained aloof from the big world of which she lived and worked. Her professional life unfolded on a much broader and more connected field. Intrigues were in full swing around Anna. Large-scale projects were being built. Deals were concluded that could change the fate of companies. She navigated the chaos with ease and enjoyed her role. But more and more she noticed that she was drawn not only to the heights of success, but also to the people who personified this success. Like Tony, Anna was attracted not only by the physical beauty of men, but also by their status, the aura of power and influence that seemed to envelop them. This was something more than a simple desire, it was akin to magic. The attention of such men stirred her blood. Over time, she began to notice that she was attracted not only to Tony or a famous singer like Adam Levine, but also to other representatives of this world, where power and status were the main currencies. It was enough for a man to look attractive, but the real spark was his position. This awareness opened up new horizons for Anna of her own desires, which she did not even suspect. She was pleased and flattered by the attention of men. Now Anna began to better understand their motives, their views, and the reasons why they were drawn to her. It was as if she read their thoughts. Whether it was a simple warehouse worker who truly admired her, or a CEO who saw her as an ally and an addition to his life, she felt valued. For some, she was the personification of beauty and grace, for others a symbol of success, an ideal companion. This new, almost hypnotic understanding opened doors for her to a world where they played by different rules and made her truly desirable. Anne could truly be called lucky. She never encountered unpleasant or humiliating situations in her interactions with men. Most of them, fascinated by her beauty and inner magnetism, were looking for an opportunity to impress her. They tried to behave correctly, showing a restrained, almost gentlemanly insistence, but always with respect for her space. When Anne gently but firmly refused, they accepted it with dignity, without crossing the line of decency. Such harmony in communication always left her with a feeling of lightness, but in recent months she began to notice changes in herself that worried her. Anne began to feel that something new, previously unfamiliar, had awakened in her. She increasingly had to admit that she was attracted to many men, and these feelings arose much more often than she would like. She couldn't help but notice the difference in the first 5 years of their marriage. Such thoughts simply did not exist. In those years, Anne did not think about other men, even if opportunities for communication or flirtation opened up for her. Her husband filled her heart and mind completely, leaving room only for him. But now that has changed. She found herself closely studying the faces and gestures of other men, noticing how their hands moved, how their voices sounded, and this gave her unexpected feelings. These were fleeting thoughts, flashes of interest, which soon became obsessive. At first, she thought it was just part of her innate curiosity, but over time she realized that she was spending too much time on fantasies. Sometimes it was Tony, with his bright charisma and captivating self-confidence. Sometimes it's someone else, a random colleague, a person from a cafe, or just a stranger who caught your eye. These thoughts became a real dilemma for Anne. She understood that there was nothing reprehensible in itself in admiring someone else's beauty or charm. But she was worried that it was starting to take up too much space in her mind. Sometimes she would spend an entire day thinking about someone's face or voice, returning to it in her imagination over and over again. Several months passed in this cycle. Each new day brought a new man, a new object of attention. And although Tony remained the main one, the most vivid image in her thoughts, he was no longer the only one. During another business trip, she decided that it was time to understand herself and find a way to cope with it. She already imagined that in a couple of years she might make a mistake. She began to feel that there were circumstances, aggravated by a small amount of alcohol, that could lead her to bed with one of these men, and she couldn't allow this. She clearly understood that mixing personal life with work was an incredibly stupid mistake. Having an affair with a friend is an equally incredibly stupid mistake. This did not mean that she had the opportunity to go to bars in search of a potential lover. Anne was busy both at work and as a wife and mother, so late at night she made an important decision. Over the next month, she decided to consciously try to banish thoughts of other men from her mind. She won't think about them. She will not represent anyone other than her husband. Anne considered herself a very disciplined person. If she can last a month, she can do it for the rest of her life. The goal was to stop thinking about other men sexually. This interfered both at work and at home. It became distracting. This had to stop. But as an analytical person, just like with a business decision, she had to be prepared for failure. So Anne also decided what she would do if she failed. She knew she couldn't continue like this. She knew it was incredibly stupid and wrong to sleep with someone associated with her work. She understood that it was incredibly stupid and wrong to sleep with her friend's husband. If she couldn't put her thoughts in order and banish other desires, she would have to find some way out. The only way out for her was to cheat on her husband. But even in such a step, which seemed to her both desperate and inevitable, strict conditions had to be met. Firstly, this should not be a person who was at least indirectly connected with her professional activities. Any connection with her work could be disastrous for her reputation, and this was unacceptable. Secondly, it could not be someone from her personal life, from her circle of friends or acquaintances, and certainly not from anyone who was in any way connected with her family. She couldn't afford to take risks. All this excluded anyone who knew her even superficially. Anne lay in bed for a long time that night, her mind racing with thoughts. The darkness in the bedroom seemed to thicken her doubts and fears, but at the same time, under this pressure, a strange determination began to emerge. If it turns out to be impossible to correct the situation within the usual framework, she will be ready to look for ways that, although they run counter to her moral principles, could maintain balance in her life. Her loved ones remained under her protection, her career was safe, and herself. She saw herself somewhere outside these rules, perhaps in a world where it is possible to forget about moral obligations at least for one night. She closed her eyes, feeling the heavy weight of worry heavy on her breathing. Thoughts about an extramarital affair remained a shadow in her mind, frightening, but alluring, like a bridge leading into the unknown, where she could find a breath of freedom or drown in a new storm of problems. As she lay there, Anne thought about the men she knew who had tried to get her into bed, many of whom were married. She realized that in most cases they did not want to leave their wives. They just needed something more. Perhaps it was the excitement of an affair with the vice president of the company. It didn't matter. Perhaps, Anne thought, she was no different. If she couldn't get rid of these thoughts, she would have to look for another way out. And hopefully, this exit would be smarter than what the men who were chasing her tried to do. She was not ready to take the risk. The minutes turned into hours. Anne couldn't sleep. She was desperately tired, but sleep did not come. Following her plan, she decided to dream up, but this time she will do it thinking exclusively about her husband. Anne focused on a romantic trip with him for Valentine's Day. It was a perfect evening, a wonderful dinner, and amazing sex afterwards. Anne tried to recreate this moment in her memory. She remembered the dinner dishes, the conversation, the sexual innuendos. She remembered how her foot accidentally touched his leg. She remembered the elevator ride back to her reserved hotel room. She remembered their kisses in the elevator. She remembered how they paused as they exited the elevator and then resumed kissing as soon as they entered the room. her with her back pressed against the wall and him pressed against her. But at that very moment, in her imagination, in her husband's place, it was not her husband, but Tony. She didn't last even a day. Her problem was serious. Something had to be done about it. She vowed to always love her husband and protect her family, but it was impossible to fight these desires. Now that her business clothes were hanging on a hanger or neatly folded in a drawer, Anne walked over to her suitcase. She opened it, ritualistically, and pulled out her workout uniform, black tight leggings made of smooth lycra that hugged her shapely legs, a supportive sports bra, and a simple white tank top, slightly wrinkled from storage. The fabric was pleasant to the touch, cool and promised freedom of movement. There was silence in the hotel room, broken only by the muffled hum of the air conditioner. Anne glanced at her watch. It was 4:45 p.m., the perfect time to head to practice. The hotel had a fitness center, and as always, she made no excuses to skip physical activity. Sport for her was not only a way to keep herself in shape, but also a way to organize her thoughts and find inner balance. Outside, Dallas offered a bright, sun-drenched day. Warm rays played on the glass facades of the buildings, and cars darted below, their movement reminiscent of the pulsation of a living organism. The evening probably promised to be hot too, but Anne was not afraid of that. She knew how to adapt, how to be ready for anything. The conference started tomorrow morning, and this evening was all hers. She already had a plan. She picked up her MP3 player, small and worn on the edges, but still serving her well. Music has always become her faithful companion during training. To the sounds of dynamic melodies, she could immerse herself in movement, isolating herself from the world. After putting on her sneakers and checking to make sure she had everything, she headed to the fitness center. As planned, Anne returned to her room at 6:20 p.m. Her body was pleasantly tired, and a slight smile played on her face, a familiar feeling of satisfaction from the work done. Entering the room, she glanced quickly at the phone. It was time to call home. After a couple of rings, the nanny answered the phone. The woman's voice was familiar and calm, adding a sense of stability. The husband was not home yet, but he was expected any minute. Anne spoke to the children, hearing their joyful voices. She asked a few simple questions, told her a little about how her trip was going, and said everything a loving mother should say, even from a distance. After hanging up, Anne felt the sticky trail of sweat begin to irritate her skin a little. It was time to freshen up. She took off her sports uniform, carefully folding it on the edge of the chair. The t-shirt, soaked with sweat, needed washing, but the leggings could still be worn again. The bathroom beckoned her with its cool cleanliness. Turning on the shower, Anne adjusted the flow of water so that it was hot enough to relieve the day's tension without burning her skin. Warm drops poured onto her shoulders, flowing down, and soon the whole world narrowed down to this soothing sound of water, the impact of streams on the tiles and the feeling of purity enveloping her from the inside. The shower was long, and in these moments she allowed herself to forget about all her worries, plunging into a moment of peace. After a warm shower, enveloping her body with soft streams, Anne began to carefully care for her skin. The steam still in the air mixed with a subtle aroma of vanilla and freshness emanating from her creams. As an experienced traveler, she knew that self-care is not just a ritual, but a necessity, especially in conditions of frequent flights and changes in climate zones. She slowly applied the light moisturizer to her face, enjoying its silky texture. The cream, enriched with tiny luminous particles, seemed to envelop her skin in a slight glow, giving it the appearance of rest and freshness. It was not an everyday work cream, but rather one that she used for special occasions, romantic meetings with her husband, or evening walks. Moving on to her clothes, Anne leaned over her suitcase, the smell of the travel fabric instantly reminding her of long trips. She chose old, but very comfortable jeans, which had helped her out more than once in everyday life, and a blouse with faded edges, which indicated that it had been worn often. Dressing quickly, she ran her palms over the folds of the fabric, making sure everything fit neatly, and picked up the iPad. Planning to have a meal at the hotel restaurant, she decided to flip through a few pages of her favorite book at the same time to take her mind off thoughts about work and completely immerse herself in a relaxing evening. Anne moved methodically, as if according to a predetermined schedule, checking off completed tasks on her imaginary list. Her movements conveyed the confidence and ease of a person accustomed to keeping everything under control. Already at 20:15, she returned to her room, feeling slightly tired, but happy with how her day had gone. Having unpacked one suitcase, she carefully laid out her things, making sure that every detail had its place. She pushed the second suitcase into a corner, gently smoothing it with her hand, as if apologizing for the temporary neglect. Anne loved order and strived to keep the space around her perfectly clean. The room now seemed cozy and furnished, perfect for another relaxing evening. Anne undressed again, removing her underwear. She put her clothes in a drawer and walked over to her partially unpacked suitcase. From there, she took out her recent purchase, a small black thong and a matching half bra. She thought they were quite sexy, and they looked even better on her. The next step was to call home and talk to my husband. This was important. She couldn't afford to forget about it. Given the time difference, it was almost time for him to go to bed. Previously, she often forgot about time zones, but with frequent travel, they became commonplace. The husband was happy that she called. They talked about children and exchanged words of love. Anne deliberately did not end the conversation first, waiting until he himself said that it was time to go to bed. After hanging up the phone, Anne decided to look at herself in the mirror. Although she was 32, Anne looked younger. Many were surprised that someone so young could hold the position of vice president of a large company. They were also surprised to learn that she was 32, still quite young for such a position. The company, however, had many employees in high positions of approximately the same age. Anne might have been a little younger than the others, but not by much. Anne was pleased with her reflection in the mirror. Her skin, glowing after a shower and light cream, looked fresh and well-groomed. Her gaze slid over the suitcase, from which she took out a recent purchase, a pair of ultra-low skinny jeans. She ran her fingers over the soft fabric, feeling how the lycra made the material springy and smooth. These jeans were on the verge of shocking, so tight that they looked more like a second skin, emphasizing every line of her slender figure. For Anne, this was a new level of boldness jeans that hugged the figure as if they were created especially for her. As she began to put them on, the fabric resisted slightly, as if testing her resolve. She carefully pulled up her jeans, feeling how they fit her hips and legs more and more tightly, emphasizing the elegance of her shape. After a little struggle, followed by a quiet chuckle from the unexpected effort, Anne finally did up the button. She took a step back to look at herself in the mirror again. Now, standing in jeans and a bra, she looked amazing. This was evidenced by the slight but satisfied smile that appeared on her face. Anne understood that her choice would cause mixed reactions from her husband. These jeans were clearly beyond his ideas of what was acceptable. She imagined his look a mixture of surprise and protest. For him, such things were too provocative, too daring. On her slender figure, with long legs and an accentuated waist, the jeans looked so sexy that they could outshine any evening dress. She knew that if he were around, he would certainly suggest replacing them with something more discreet. But the thought of her wearing them alone, perhaps while walking the streets or dining in a restaurant, would probably horrify him. Anne smiled, realizing that jeans had become more than just clothes, but a symbol of her self-confidence. She enjoyed the moment, the way the fabric fit tightly, emphasizing her silhouette. She wasn't thinking about judgments or opinions right now. This image was for her to feel especially feminine and a little daring. The mirror, reflecting her chiseled figure, immediately confirmed that the jeans were particularly low-rise. The fabric barely covered her hips, creating a daring yet sophisticated look. Anne, carefully examining herself, adjusted her jeans several times to make sure that her thong did not peek out from under the narrow strip of her belt. She chuckled to herself, knowing that every detail was important. As if by inertia, she turned sideways and then turned her back to the mirror to evaluate what her butt looked like in those jeans. This was the moment of truth. In such an outfit, she would definitely attract attention wherever she went. Jeans emphasized her curves, making them even more seductive. Anne was always proud of her slender figure, which was the result not only of good genetics, but also of regular exercise. Her stomach remained completely flat, but she rarely allowed herself to show it. Even when I was with my husband, the most that could be seen was a slight hint of a navel, which only flickered under clothes. But today everything was different. She decided to take a risk, go beyond the usual, and break her own rules a little. Reaching into her suitcase, Anne pulled out the finishing touches to her look, a pair of black platform sandals and 3 crop tops. White, black, and neon pink. Each top was unique. The white one was decorated with delicate embroidered patterns, the black one had neat silver sequins, and the pink one was bright and daring in design. They all ended above the navel, creating a bold and dramatic accent at the waist. After a moment's consideration, Anne settled on pink. It matched her mood, perfectly bold and a little playful. She pulled on the top, feeling the soft fabric hug her body, emphasizing every curve. Going back to the mirror, she ran her hand over the surface of the top, smoothing out invisible folds. The outline of her bra showed slightly through the thin material, adding a slight piquancy. Assessing her image, Anne narrowed her eyes with a slight smile. The jeans and top looked amazing together. Her midriff was now completely exposed, creating a daring accent to the look. She glanced at the sandals and frowned slightly. I wish I had bought another pair to go better with this pink top, she thought. However, it was already too late to change, and she waved her hand, deciding not to bother. The top, jeans, and sandals, combined with her confident posture, looked so impressive that hardly anyone would have paid attention to other details. If her husband saw her now, he would probably be speechless and immediately file for divorce. In his eyes, there would be no explanation that could justify such a daring outfit. Anne even imagined what he would look like if he found out about this. Shock, bewilderment, and then inevitable anger. She chuckled at the thought of his reaction, but didn't allow herself to dwell on it too long. Now she was completely different, not the strict, reserved woman whose images were carefully selected for business meetings and official events. Tonight belonged to a different Anne, brave, liberated, ready for any adventure. Her reflection in the mirror fully confirmed that she had achieved the desired result. The look was bold, sexy, and a little provocative. The skinny jeans fit like a second skin, highlighting her slender legs and round hips. The bright neon pink top contrasted perfectly with the black sandals, and the exposed midriff added a sassy edge to the whole outfit. It was a radical transformation, as if a strict businesswoman had shed her usual mask and became a girl ready to embark on exciting adventures. Anne went back to the mirror to look at herself again. She turned left, then right, taking in every detail. She used her fingers to lightly smooth the top at the waist, making sure everything fit perfectly. The reflection in the mirror gave her a strange mixed feeling, admiration for herself and slight inner doubt, which she quickly brushed aside. She muttered with a sly smile, "If I really want to look like a woman of easy virtue, then let it be an impeccable image." There was a grain of self-irony in these words, but they also reflected her mood. Anne had never allowed herself anything like this before. Tonight was a challenge for her, a moment when she went beyond her usual boundaries. Anne took out a black jacket and looked at herself in the mirror again. It makes the look a little less provocative and adds a little class, she thought. But after a minute of thought, she decided to abandon the jacket. Today, it was her defiant side that won. She carefully checked that everything was in its place, gathered her resolve, and left the room. Anne reminded herself that she was in Dallas, Texas. Not only is it warm, but there are fun accents and even funnier cowboy hats everywhere. This thought calmed her a little. She began to feel nervous for the first time, and the feeling of guilt increased this anxiety. Entering the elevator, she again noticed her reflection in the mirror. She thought that her outfit was no funnier than a cowboy hat when you looked at it. Why is it funny to dress like a cowboy, but not as a girl ready for anything? Anne couldn't take her eyes off her. She was worried that someone else would get into the elevator on one of the lower floors. She wanted to spend the evening without unexpected spectators and unwanted consequences. She acted strictly according to her plan, but the prospect of someone outside the game seeing her like this would be humiliating for her. This provocative outfit was intended exclusively for tonight and not for prying eyes. She took another look at her reflection and then stepped out of the elevator when it stopped on the first floor. She took the side exit of the hotel to avoid appearing in the lobby. Anne grinned as she looked at her reflection and mentally dubbed her outfit revealing. Her gaze slid from the tight jeans to the colorful top that emphasized her figure and boldly revealed her flat stomach. She ran her fingers along the fabric on her hips, as if involuntarily admiring the way the jeans emphasized every line of her body. It was a daring and, without a doubt, provocative image that challenged all her usual standards. She knew she looked tempting, perhaps too tempting. "No, I'm not going to sell your services today," Anne thought with slight irony, imagining how her appearance might be perceived. However, she realized that her image was so perfect for something like this that she could only smile at the thought. Her confidence grew even more, as if this playful admission only strengthened her sense of control over herself and the situation. She looked around at herself again, noting how the combination of the outfit, the shoes, and her posture created an impression that was hard to ignore. If she ever had to look for a job in a field where appearance was of paramount importance, Anne was confident that she would know how to present herself favorably. Her appearance exactly met the requirements: bright, spectacular, and defiant. She smiled at her reflection, her gaze became a little defiant, and the corners of her lips twitched in a mocking half-smile. She liked everything about this game with herself, from the courage of her choice to the realization that she was going beyond the usual boundaries, even if only for herself. The target was an area with several bars nearby. Only 3 short blocks separated her from the entertainment center. There were several bars catering mainly to students, one with a more urban vibe and one with a more rural, cowboy feel. The journey was short, but not pleasant. A single, attractive woman in a turn-me-on outfit couldn't feel completely safe walking around alone. Walking carefully, even with her shoes on, she moved forward quickly. She felt nervous and decided to go to the first bar she came across. It was one of those huge places with big screen TVs, a dance floor in the back, several places for drinks, and different areas for socializing, standing tables and booths. The place was quite busy for a Tuesday evening. College students have trouble recognizing the days of the week. Anne fought her way through the crowd to get to the bar. She quietly assessed the competition. There were different girls there. Most of them looked young, in their early 20s. Some were clearly there to hook up skinny jeans and short skirts for eye candy, while others clearly weren't looking to compete. Out of the crowd, Anne thought her own makeup outfit was the most overtly sexy. Anne remained nervous, but now she also felt excited. People came here to have fun and meet people. She was going to actively participate in this game. Being older than her competitors, she had to convey her message very directly. It's not like it's possible to interview every potential candidate. At 32, Anne might have looked 27, maybe 26, but she doubted anyone would mistake her for younger than that. The man's initial interest was based on what he saw. According to her plan, people began to pay attention. Guys in such places have their radars constantly on, and many eyes are fixed on a girl in jeans and clothes calling for intimacy. Anne felt eyes on her. She even felt the men from behind looking at her ass. The girls were looking at her too, some unhappy with the competition, some with mild to moderate distaste for an outfit they considered perhaps more revealing than sexy. Before reaching the bar, a young man stopped her and offered to buy her a beer. They introduced themselves. His name was Scott. Anne examined him quickly. At first glance, he was cute, and she liked his accent. She glanced at the dance floor, and seeing that it was more than half full, she asked him to dance first. She realized that she wanted to appreciate him. Anne, as usual, handled this as a business decision. The music was loud, bass-heavy hardcore dance music. They started dancing. Anne relaxed. She knew other men kept looking at her. She wondered if she should look at the others before settling on Scott. Anne was a good dancer. Tonight, she was going to dance a little more freely. If this guy doesn't fit, there will be another one to quickly take his place. Scott seemed young to her. It wasn't bad she expected to choose a younger guy, but she didn't expect him to be so young. He was nice, very nice. She specifically examined the front of his jeans. Anne also liked that he quickly took steps towards her. A lot of guys are bad dancers, but Scott was pretty good. He had basic moves. Without being able to look at all the guys in the place, Anne thought Scott was a good choice. He was a sweet, sexy, really young guy. At one point while they were dancing, Anne put her hand on his waist. Scott seemed a little shy now, but smiled when she let her hand linger on him. After one song, Anne asked for a beer. They found a semicircular buffet and soon after a waitress. The beer will arrive soon. They started a small conversation. Scott managed to say that Anne looked good, which was his way of saying either hot, sexy, or slutty. It didn't matter to her what exactly he meant. The sideboard, being semicircular, allowed them to sit next to each other rather than opposite. This in turn allowed Anne to place her hand on Scott's leg from time to time. Scott did not reciprocate. Anne was beginning to realize that Scott was so young that he was not yet confident in his movements. Anne was wondering what to do next. Should I just stop small talk? She had hoped for a smoother transition. She hoped Scott would take more initiative. He was clearly interested and probably didn't think of Anne as a long-term potential girlfriend. Again, Anne perceived this as part of his inexperience. Yes, he was nice, but Anne wondered if she should look for someone more aggressive. Ultimately, she decided that it was the package that was important, and it was a very nice package. The beer has arrived. They continued talking, Anne telling him why she was there, and Scott talking a little about school. He understood that she was older, but did not ask questions. At one point, he joked lightly with the other guys who were having fun in one part of the bar. Anne decided this was an opportunity to steer the conversation toward her goal for the night. She said, "Yeah, guys will be guys. They're hard to deal with, but they can still be useful from time to time." Anne confidently took control of the situation as if testing her ability to manage this meeting. She felt the excitement of her courage and had no intention of stopping. Scott, although a little taken aback by her intensity, looked pleased. Their mutual attraction became obvious, and the atmosphere became tense with every minute. As they left the bar, Anne took his hand, strengthening the connection and giving herself confidence. They moved quickly, hardly talking, but the exchange of glances spoke volumes. The energy between them grew like an electric current that was impossible to ignore. Entering the elevator, Anne felt the tension reach its peak. She pressed the button for her floor and then turned to Scott, pulling him towards her. Their eyes met, and an instant impulse made them move even closer. She felt like she was in charge of the moment, feeling that her determination only fueled Scott's interest. Once in the room, Anne again took the initiative. She felt an inner voice confidently telling her to move on. Everything happened as she planned, but at the same time it seemed completely natural. Her every gesture was purposeful, and she loved being the center of attention from this young, energetic man. Scott, for his part, didn't ask too many questions. He felt like he was in a whirlwind of events that captured him. He knew the best solution would be to just go with the flow and let Anne guide their interactions. Her confidence was fascinating, and he was ready to support her in any endeavor. Anne had mixed feelings. She knew that what she was doing was out of the ordinary, but she still felt comfortable in this new role. The decision she made seemed right to her, even if it contradicted many of her previous principles. At that moment, she was overcome by an awareness of freedom that she had not felt for a long time, and she allowed herself. They lay down on the bed, continuing to hug and kiss. Anne felt that nothing was important to her now except this moment. It was their meeting spontaneous, without obligations, but surprisingly sincere. She enjoyed every moment, feeling free and relaxed, as if she had thrown off all the burdens that had accumulated over the past years. Afterwards, when they were already lying next to each other, Scott gently ran his hand through her hair. "You're incredible," he whispered, and Anne smiled, feeling that his words were sincere. She closed her eyes, trying to remember this moment, a feeling of lightness, closeness, and non-binding joy. "It's time for me to get back," he suddenly said, starting to get dressed. Anne knew he was right, but she wanted to hold on to this moment a little longer. "Are you sure you won't stay?" she asked, hoping to hear yes. But Scott smiled softly. "I have work to do tomorrow, but I'll be thinking about you." He put on his shirt, buttoning the last button, and walked to the door. Anne looked at him, feeling both slightly sad and satisfied. She knew that this night would remain something special for her. To be continued. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell so you don't miss the next part of this story. She will be there very soon. The link to the sequel will be in the description of this video below. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.